Let's get everybody in here. How we doing? We'll get some people here. Hey guys. I feel like you're way out there in the arena. I'm like a rock star here. Just, I'll be like Drew Barrymore, just a little wacky. If you've seen her show, she's really at a loss. She doesn't know what to do. That's how I feel. Where is everybody? We got a good group in both places. Before we get started, there's a new Zoom etiquette document. Let's take a look at it. I'm going to admit everybody. So even if you're here, go ahead and join the Zoom session because I'm going to try to use our Zoom session for attendance. So they talk to each other, just not super well. So in order for me to be able to use the Zoom session for attendance, make sure to put your first name and your last name, because Zoom or our attendance thing is not figuring out who people are if they have anything other than their first and last name. It seems weird because I would think that it would use your OTC ID since it's got that information on both sides, but I don't think the programmers use that yet. So we'll see. So anyways, if you would make sure it's your first and last name. You guys have just done such a good job with everything all along. I wanted to remind everybody that it's like being in class. So I know you try to stay at the Zoom session when we're in class, but I want you to look at the tools that are available in Zoom and let's use some of those. So like if you needed to step away, let me see if I can bring the Zoom toolbar back on my screen. If you look at annotate here, you'll have all sorts of different things that you can do on the Zoom session. So like you can highlight, spotlight something for me. It's always super helpful. I've had different classes where sometimes people get really a huge amount of enjoyment out of the annotation tools and I can end up with 57 arrows all pointing to the right thing. But it keeps people busy, so it's kind of a good thing as long as it doesn't erase the thing. So then how do I get rid of it? I have to go back to my mouse if I want to click on things, and then I can just use the X to get rid of it after I go back to my mouse icon. Now, the other thing that I'm asking for you to do is to use the participants window. The participants window might look a little different for you than it does for me, so I couldn't really do screenshots of it or anything. But the options that Zoom includes here are really handy. So like if I say, did you guys get that okay? You could be super helpful and say yes. And then I would be like, awesome, I got some feedback here from the black squares. And then if you were sad, you could say no. Or if that was the right answer or whatever. And then you can say go slower and go faster. But usually if I'm going, somebody else is gonna have to watch that and let me know. So I don't know why. I've got counts up here telling me that people said to go faster and go slower. And so when I'm coding, even if I might not notice that right away, that's still really helpful because I've had some people in the chat be like, go slow down. Especially this morning, I was ready to get some stuff done. Now, the other thing is if you click on more here, we have the clock that you can use to indicate that you're away. And then that way, I wouldn't call on you for anything, if you had to step away from the Zoom session for some reason when you're at home. Because here I can tell that when you're at home, it can be kind of rough. Now, you do have to turn that back off. So it's kind of a toggle thing for the Zoom session. So you don't want to leave those on forever. What other ones do they have? The coffee cup, yeah, I'll ignore you. But you could take a break. You could just say you're away. And then we have the like and dislike and the applause. So especially when somebody has presented something to the class, we want to applaud, give them some applause. Yay, thanks, Vicky. I like applause. All right, so we can do all of those Zoom things. So let's use our tool since we have more and more people staying home. And we only have today and next week, but still yet, we might as well use our toys that we have, right? Make them serve their purpose. So get in the Zoom session if you're not in it. And I did add this new feature of getting kicked. So if somebody really annoys me in the Zoom session, I'm going to kick them out. And then I'll have to make new rules for this because you can tell where this came from. Now, one thing that I haven't added to the Zoom etiquette rules is having a camera at home. And you know that as an instructor, that would be a really valuable thing for me. Because if I could ask people to turn their cameras on and see everybody's faces, then that would be so much more feedback for me than just talking to the black squares. Unfortunately, in our area, we just don't have the bandwidth to support that. If everybody's got their cameras on, we're not going to be doing much work in any other way. But I do think that I might start asking people to at least have one, make sure they have one, because I'd like people to be able to turn their camera on if they have a question or something. And you know, you can do that background thing. You don't have to show your house, your dirty room. I always use the background thing. Okay, so that's our big Zoom etiquette update. Let me turn off our music. I was so happy today when I left to go outside and eat, and I heard music coming from several of the different classrooms down the hall. I was like, awesome. It's so great when you can start a trend. I really do like it. Isn't that terrible? But it's fun to be a trendsetter, you know? And you're like, yeah, you guys, we did need to do something with this terrible, overwhelming silence everywhere. All right, Padlet. Let's take a look at that. Let me find it because it's been a really long time. And we should have looked at it already. But we haven't. Do I? Do you remember it? That was a while ago. I've done something. There it is. I think it was like week 10.
This one was a long time ago.
Yeah, week 10. The Padlet code snippets. Yeah, because it's going to take us a few minutes to go through it, and I apologize that we've just been so busy I haven't gotten back to it. I think everybody's done a really good job with it, and I've seen people looking at it and reviewing, and I think that's really good. So I'm sad in the one hand that I had to change the way I do this activity, because you know change is hard, right? And I liked the way it worked before with the Post-it notes, and we would review right that day, and that worked out really well. And now doing it this way, it's like, gosh, it was weeks ago. We obviously should have reviewed this already, my bad. But I've seen people go back to it and kind of, you know, how is that loop? How did that work? So maybe it's good to have it out here for a while where people can refer back to it and look at it. And then yesterday when we went through, I think we were able to clear up some questions for some people. So maybe it's nice to give your brain a chance to absorb things sometimes. I'm going to try to bring up the smart notebook thingy so I can write on the smart board, hopefully, and people at home can see it. So let's see if I can do this technical thing. It's thinking about it. Very slowly. Okay. Get this out of my way. All right, I think that I can do some drawing here with this. And I want to do that because sometimes it is really helpful for us to desk check code as we're looking at it. So I'm going to bring up this very first one. This very first loop is a while true loop. So we know from the very beginning looking at it that it's an infinite loop, right? Because a while true is never going to stop unless something inside the loop makes it break. Inside the while true loop, we're printing to infinity and beyond, we're getting close. Then we have on %d now. We know that %d is a replacement parameter, and it's going to be replaced by the value of x. So in our code here, x starts out with a value of 1, and after the print statement, we add 1 to x. So what we should see is to infinity blah, blah, and beyond, we're getting close on 1 now, on 2 now, on 3 now, on 4 now, and we should keep seeing those messages with that number incrementing forever, right? Because it's never going to stop, because there is no break statement inside that loop, so it's going to go on forever. So I think that that looks like what our answers are saying. So good job. Let's look at this next one then. In this one, there were some things that were a little bit past where we were at the time when you guys did this, because we were really using our string here is an array, right? So whenever we look at a string, it is an array of characters. Because it's an array, we can use it in a for each statement. So this for loop is a for each statement because it's processing a list or an array. And the array name is string. So what we're saying here is for each letter in that string, print each letter. So we should see H, then E, then L, then L, then O. And it looks like everybody's got that on their answers. Great job. So we can process that string using a for each loop just like any other array. And this next one does that same thing. So in this example, instead of our string being in a variable, our string is just right there in our for each statement. And we have the for each statement set up to say for a letter that's in this string, Python, print out current letter, space colon, then the letter. So we would actually print out current letter, space colon P, current letter, space colon Y. Now, what I would have let people do who were grading this one, they may have decided that they would let people have it right if they had this space after the colon. And then other people grading this might have said, nope, that's not what it says. It says the space should be before the colon. So we have to be super detail oriented, don't we? I know it's driving you crazy with the auto grade thing, but that's going to help you on down the road, because that's how detail oriented we have to be as developers. I was telling the class yesterday a little story. When I started working at Conoco, one of the very first things my supervisor asked me to do was make a list of about 15 social security numbers. They had just put a system into production, and these 15 people had exceeded their expense account limits. They had gone to Europe and they had bought like $20,000 tables and things like that with their expense account. So they had just blown the system sky high. So she needed a list of all of their social security numbers so that she could update information and get it all fixed. So she gave me that list and she left. And the next day when I got there, she was just really, really sweet. And she went on and on and on. She said, I checked that list you did for me. Said, I know it didn't seem like a big deal, but those were like the top guys here at Conoco, their social security numbers. So I double checked it before I did anything with them. And you didn't make one single mistake typing in those numbers. Now, is that a big deal? All I was doing was typing in some numbers. It wasn't like it required a lot of technical skills or anything, but that made my manager trust me. So even though that was only the first week I worked there, she knew that I was a detail-oriented person. She could trust me to finish assignments and not make mistakes. If I had made a little mistake, it would have been completely understandable. She wouldn't have gotten mad about it at all. She would have just fixed it and gone on, but I wouldn't have developed that level of trust that I was able to develop right away. So our detail-oriented field requires attention to detail. That's just what we do. So all of that goes to saying, does it matter that in the code, the space is before the colon? You bet it does. That's how they want it, or they got a bug. I don't know. But we can't assume that it's some other way, because that's the way it is, right? So even if we think that's wrong, it doesn't matter. That's the way it is. So the right answer would have a space before the colon. And as I look in here, I'm seeing some people did that and some people didn't. We have a lot of variation, totally understandable. So good attention to detail. Everybody was trying to really pay attention to that thing, knowing that could be a getcha. Let's see who that was. Somebody's dinging at me. Oh, okay, okay. All right, so this next one, whenever we're working on this one, it's just a couple lines of code. And this is one that I wanted to do on the board. So when we start out with this one, our for loop is saying that we're going to use a variable x and that we want to run with the range of x being 0 up to 3. So when we run this, the first time our for loop executes, x is going to be set to 0. So what are we going to print out? We're on time 0. Then we're going to execute that for loop again. X is going to be changed to 1. And then we'll see that print out. We're on time 1. Then we'll execute the for loop again. X will be changed to 2. We'll use the for loop body to print out we're on time 2. And then our for loop will be complete. Because the next time through, when we set x to 3, it would be equal to our ending number. So we would end our loop and not use the loop body. All right. What about this one? In this one, we are not using a for loop, we're using a while loop. And we've got it set up in our while loop to say, while I is less than 9, we want to print the value of I, and then we want to add 2 to I. So again, if I use my ability to depth check here, and especially if this were a test question, I would want to, I'm going to write down that I have a variable named I. Give me a dot. And it starts out equal to 4. My calibration is a little off. You can tell. So since it starts out being 4, when I go into my while loop, is I less than 9? Yep. So I'm going to print I. There's my first one. Then I'm going to add 2 to I. So now I is 6. I'm going to reevaluate my while loop. Is I less than 9? Yep. So I'm going to print it. And then I'm going to add 2. So now I will become 8. Is I less than 9? Yes. So I'm going to print it. And then I'm going to add 2. Is I less than 9? No. So we're done with our loop. So our output from that one would be 4, 6, 8. Beautiful. Now, our next one is the T. Here we've got our T, and we want to make sure that our tea has cooled off enough to drink. So in this example, we're starting out with a variable to keep track of our temperature. So I'll just call it T because my calibration, whoops, is so messy. And I'm finding something awesome there that I don't know how to use, obviously. So I'm going to start out with T equal to 115. Just going to write that down and get started. Now my while loop says, while that temperature is greater than 112, which it is, I'm going to print out that temperature. So I'll print out 115. Then I want to subtract 1 from our temperature. So now it's 114. Is that greater than 112? Yep. I'll print it. Subtract 1. Is it greater than 112? Yep. I'll print it. and subtract 1. Is it greater than 112? Nope. So now I'm at the end. So my output would be 115, 114, 113. And then everybody did great and noticed that after the loop, we're going to print out this message that T is cool enough. Because it's really easy to miss that final print is going to come out. So great. Okay, this is a good one. For x in range 10, if x modulus 2 equals 0, what's that statement going to do? What's a modulus? Do you remember?
It's a remainder.
It's a remainder. So it does our divide operation and gives us the remainder. So let's write that one down. This one is a really good one for us to test this way. So we start out, and in our for loop, our variable name is going to be x. So as we go into our loop with our range, the first execution of our loop, x will be set to 0. When we do our modulus, we're going to set our answer is going to be 0. So we're going to get this statement that says to continue. Continue, of course, just returns us to the for loop to reevaluate it. So it's just like, go back to 4, go back home. All right, so we hit that continue. So now we're going to add to x. So now x is 1. When we do the modulus command, our answer is going to be 1. It's not equal to 0. So we will not do the continue command. Instead, we will print out x. So we'll print 1. Now we're through with our loop body. So we'll increment x. 2 now. If we use the modulus command and divide 2 by 2, our remainder is 0. So we would just continue. So then we'll increment x, and now it's 3. Now when we do the modulus command, our remainder is going to be 1. So we will not continue. Instead, we will print out the value of x. As we see the pattern, we can assume here the number 4, our modulus result will be 0 because we can see now this if statement is checking to see if this number is even or odd. Because if it's evenly divisible by 2, it's even. So our 4 won't print, our 5 would. We've reached the point here in our desk checking where we've established our pattern, and we can answer the question with the right information that we have now. The last number that will be output would be our 9. So we can finish answering that one. So that's just going to give us all of the odd numbers between 0 and 10. Really good. And lastly, this one is a little bit different. Here, we're saying that while x is less than 3, in the range 0 to 3, we want to print it. Otherwise, we want to print that last message. So for this one, we should get 0, 1, 2. Then what are we going to get when it's done? Everybody's pretty much consistent here, saying we're going to get this answer that says final x equals 2. So did you guys try it? Should we try it? Are you sure that's what it's again? Are you sure? I believe it. I don't use that else stuff clause on a while loop very much. It's kind of an unusual syntax. So I'll just take your word. You guys are also good. That was beautiful. Great job. Great job, everybody, on those. So yeah, if the world were perfect, I would have gotten back to those faster. We have another thing that's that same way. It was our Colab notebook. I'm going to go to our modules here. Last week, we started on that Colab notebook for chapter 7, and it was set to be due tonight. And so let me back up here further. before Thanksgiving, when we worked on this, we hadn't really had time to do everything for arrays with our one class session. And I said something like, don't worry, I'll get a video posted, I'll get you guys some instructions. And then I just went home and ignored it. And I can tell you, I didn't have any fun, don't worry. I had all of these people saying, what's your plan? Are you gonna go remote? Are you gonna flip? Give us documentation, we wanna know. So instead of me getting to make videos and figure out what our continuation was, I got to do a whole bunch of COVID planning and get absolutely nothing done, because every time we talk about all these COVID plans, nothing really gets accomplished, right? So anyways, I didn't have time to do our video before Thanksgiving, and I would have had time last week, but I didn't want to, and I figured you guys didn't want to work on it anyways. So we would just regroup when we got back, and so that's what we're gonna do. So I deleted it, if you noticed, from Canvas, because people were like trying to finish it, trying to turn it in and worrying, and I was like, quit worrying.
If you did submit it though, does that mean my submission disappeared and I should have to resubmit it?
You'll have to submit it again, yes, because that was the only way I could get rid of it. I'm glad you asked, because I was just like, stop it, because I don't want you to go to all that trouble. So we should have you drive today, if you've got the rest of it.
There's some interesting things to talk about in there, kind of like maybe like where the picture was taken of the pseudocode, because some of it you'd have to have your book open to know that. You know, sometimes in the book it says we'll assume to save space that these variables are already declared. You gotta know that.
Okay.
I guess if you don't have your book open and you're looking at it, you might be scratching your head.
I think that that is really important stuff, and I am so impressed that you got through it, because I was just like, there is no way that you guys should be able to figure this stuff out. You did too. So awesome. So I deleted it, not to be mean, but just because I wanted everybody to quit worrying about it. So we'll definitely want to look at all of those questions that you have. Now I put it back out here in Canvas. And yes, if you did submit it, you'll have to submit it again, because I had to get pretty dramatic with it to get rid of it, since people had submitted. You're such hard workers. Okay, so I'm going to get mine open. And the reason I want to get mine open is because it should be where we left off before Thanksgiving. So let me get there. So mine should be this one. We're looking for the week 13, chapter 7, arrays and lists. And if we just kind of review, what I've been doing is I'm grading them, is I'm looking at each of the student activities over here in the table of contents, and just kind of double checking to make sure that the activity is completed. I've had to, of course, make a list of which ones we did in class and which ones you had to do on your own. So I tried to give the ones that you did on your own more points, but it's been kind of a general thing as we work through it and figure out how we're gonna use these documents. And I so appreciate you guys being flexible and going with new technology. Your jobs will be this way too. Whenever you work in the technology field, you wanna work. This giant monitor is my problem. It takes me a while to realize these things. Oh, somebody had it stacked up as well.
Because mine was like way up here.
That's how these two are too. What is this, just a giant force field? It's like the wall of against Riley or something.
Yeah.
That's for Dr. Ford, not for me, I'm sure. Okay. So anyways, just try to go through and look at these. And when you get a job, where I was going with that is, I've had jobs with companies who like to try new technology. And then I've had jobs at companies that were kind of worried and more concerned about money, and they didn't like to try new things. there's strengths and weaknesses for both, without a doubt. But for me, for my personality type, I prefer working for a company that enjoys trying new technology. I like learning new things, even though sometimes those things can be frustrating. I like that opportunity. Some people don't. Some people need for things to change. So they want one of those kind of companies that's more stable that way. Our collab notebooks, we're kind of like a company that is willing to try new technology here, because I sort of said, you guys would like to try this new technology and we're going to see how it works. So I appreciate the fact that you've been willing to explore and see how it's going. So as I look through, I see that we did student activity 1 and 2. Student activity 2 was the little array where we kept track of our rainfall amounts. Let's take a look at that one for a second. In this program, we developed an array called rain, and we said it was going to have 12 entries. And for each of those entries, we were going to prompt the user for rainfall for the month. And so we used our index for our month number. So like if K, being our index variable, was 0, we used K and added 1 to it to say enter rainfall for month 1, enter rainfall for month 2. And then we saved all those rainfall amounts and calculated the average and printed it all out. Cool enough. So I'd like you to take a few minutes here, and this is kind of jump right into it when you've been gone for a week or so and really get to thinking. So I'm going to set my alarm for about 7 minutes. Just want you to have some time to think about it. What I would like is for you to create a parallel array in this program that contains the name of the month. Jan, Feb, Mar. And instead of outputting this month number here, let's output that month's name, that 3-letter name of the month. Okay, so I'm going to set my alarm about 7 minutes. I want you to think about that and see if you can implement that, and then we'll do it together. How you doing? First thing, be create our array. Okay, I'm going to cancel this. It's close to being done. Now, we set up our months array here, or list, that has each month in this list. So that's going to be a parallel array. It's parallel to our rainfall array. Index entry 0 for our rainfall array is the number for index value 0 of our months array, Jan. So we should be able to utilize that in our print statement. So right here in our print statement, instead of using K to print out a number, let's use our months list. Now, which month do we want to print out? Well, the one that it is at index location K, because K is keeping track of where we are in our array. So just making that change should make that print. Now, let's test it before we make the same change down here in our output loop. I'm going to run this thing. Let it get started. And here we go. Enter rainfall for month Jan. So that looks good. And I'm going to run through all my different months. I'll just end this thing because I don't want to do 12 of them. It looks good. That's what we wanted. So now we should be able to make the same change in our for loop to print out each month. Right now, our print statement says we want to print out rainfall for the month plus K plus 1. So right there in that spot is where we want to instead use our months array and use our K variable as our index. So whenever we're using parallel arrays like that, it's really pretty simple because we already have that K variable set up to be our index, our pointer into our array. So we can just use that same variable as our pointer into our parallel array. Now we should be able to run it and make sure everything is good the whole way through. and I entered all my data. Oops, it's mad at me. Where am I? Index out of range, and
You have 12 in your for loop instead of 11? Yeah.
do I? April. I'm missing a couple, huh? I get sidetracked. All that detail orientation, you know.
Wouldn't you also want to change your for loop to 11?
No, we want 0 to be our first index value. So 11 would be our last one. So on an array that's a size of 12, the valid index values would be 0 through 11. Since we start at 0 for our indexing, our valid index locations always end one less than the size of our array. Let's test it again, though, to make sure, because we should test it. You can see how it looked like it was all working, but I had made like a little typo. Those things are what we're always testing for. Now I should see all of my output months. Beautiful. So notice how easy it was for us to set up that parallel array and just plug that right into our code because we already had everything all set up for using it. Oh, sure, Nikki, let's go ahead and I'll stop sharing so you can share. Show us what you got. Line 15. That might just be from when we were running. Let's run it again and see. Because it could just be from when we stopped running it. Nope. Which one is it really mad at?
Oh.
Is it line 24 that it's really mad at? Or scroll down a little further. Oh, it is. It's that one. Okay. So there it is, right before the double quotes that begin your is, we're missing our plus sign. Now try it. Now it'll be really mad because that was not a number. Looks good. Everybody else is okay? All right, now on this one, don't forget, the big instruction for this one was that you should comment each line of code about its purpose. We have most of them already commented, so that just leaves you a few. Okay, so now we kind of jumped ahead there a little bit and looked at parallel arrays because we'd been looking at these already. So 7.3, we skipped last time. Let's go back around and hit this one. Okay, so for this example, it's real similar to the next one. Let's check it. Yeah, we did that the next one, where we did our scores so that you would have an example. But I would still feel better if we did this one together, 7.4, 7.3. So 7.3 wants us to have two arrays, a names array and a sales array. And these are going to be our salesperson and their sales amount. So we're going to be prompting for their the salesperson's name and their monthly sales. When the user types in a star for the name of the salesperson, then that means that they're done. So they still have to type in like star comma 0 when they're done. So it's a little bit interesting. Let's see if we can do this one and Python. So this will be example 7.3. And I think they just called it parallel arrays. Justin, did you do this one? Do you want to show everybody how you did it?
Sure.
Let's do that. And we'll just enjoy your beautiful. And let me unshare. Okay, show us what you got.
First, I declared a array with 100 spaces and indices, I guess. Sales with the same thing, 100 indexes. And then I declared the variables we're going to use basically as counters. These are basically counters. We can look at the pseudo code while we do this as well. I switched my K's to I. I just get rid of K if anybody's wondering.
That's fine. Mm-hmm.
So we're inputting the names, and I append the names to line 4. And 5, we're going to do the sales. And this is where it's going to give you the instructions. You could exit out here. I thought this was weird. I mean, this was like, you have to follow the tracks of this code.
Isn't it weird? Yeah.
There's nothing defensively about it. You have to, like, type in specific things to exit out of it.
Uh-huh.
You know, it's very, very easy to crash it, I guess.
Right. Not very user-friendly, is it?
Yeah. But we're just copying the pseudo code or
Mm-hmm.
what they want to do. So it's basically just the while loop. I set up my variable here, which is basically like a for loop. Just instead of that, we're just doing it kind of a different way by adding I to iterate through our arrays. Let's see here. So let's put some notes on here.
Good. And then that if statement, we're trying to figure out which one is the largest.
Yes. Okay. So once we enter in, when we get into the while loop, it's actually set. It's keeping track of the highest, right? Is that what? Yeah. So once you hit the highest, it's going to stay at that amount, and no matter what you put in after that, unless it's higher, it'll change that amount. And that's what that's doing right there with the if statement.
Good.
And then at the end, when you print it out, it'll give you who ended up hitting that tick mark.
Perfect. Can you leave that up for a minute and we'll just let everybody get it?
Sure.
Go ahead and copy his code into yours and make sure you've got it working.
So line 3 is just a different way of, instead of doing a separate line for each variable, I just did that a little differently. I'm not going to start to use it that way.
Yeah, I think it looks good. While you guys are getting that in, I want to mention that Tutoring Center is looking for programming tutors, and this class has really done an outstanding job. You guys have kind of blown all their theories that the hybrid thing wasn't going to work out. Sorry. thank you, I guess. I don't know. I know you've worked hard, but you've done a really good job. So if you're interested in tutoring, let me know and I'll get you that information so that you can fill out an application, because they're always looking for good 120 tutors. They also need tutors for like CIS101. So those classes that are early on. And then of course, as you take additional classes, they would ask you to start tutoring for those too, but you can only tutor for classes that you've already had. But do send me an email or something if that's something you're interested in, so I can get you the information.
I noticed that next semester does have, is it more hybrid classes?
Oh, I'm more,
Like
huh? You're gonna try to kill us all?
Yeah, I think
Well,
Monty's doing hybrid now. Did she always do hybrid?
No,
I don't think so.
no, it's new. And so that 150 class that's hybrid will be the first time we'll be doing a hybrid 150 for C#1. We'll see how it works. And you know, it's just so hard to know because this class has done so well. But you know, I mean, you guys might have just been a really awesome group. You know, you might have just done really well if you were meeting every day too, and then outstanding. It's so hard to know because you know sometimes you get those classes that are just like, oh, I don't even want to go. And then sometimes you get classes where it just seems like everybody is really picking up on concepts and doing things and working well together. So I hope you guys haven't just been an anomaly.
Well, in the very beginning, right, you were giving us, we had like a YouTube video or two of the next class. It seemed like, you know, we're getting just more time with you. You know, I mean, we're still kind of covering this stuff at the same pace.
Yes.
That's what it felt like.
Yes.
There's just more time with, with the instructor.
Yeah, I think so. So it's working out. If I can keep doing that way, you know, it's just sometimes the scheduling has been a little awkward doing it that way, but I think we managed to get it to work out. And this semester's been awful. So surely if we can do it this semester, we can do it anytime. So we'll see how it goes. Dr. Ford has done the hybrid classes more for the more advanced classes, because usually once people have reached that level, like the capstone class has always been hybrid, you know, you don't need as much time in class as you get more advanced. So it's just we're moving it down to the lower classes to offer more scheduling options, because people just need more options. Sometimes it's just really hard to be in class 2 times a week. So, and then like I said, that one that's a D block, the 150 class, I'm worried about that one because that'll be 8 weeks, twice a week instead of 16 weeks.
That was that's just C#. That's coming out of intro program. Yeah, that you might get mixed results on that one.
Yeah, we'll see how that one goes. But they like having it because that way, if somebody really blows the C# class at the beginning of the semester, it gives them an option to take it again before the semester's over. And that kind of person might be successful. So say we have somebody in the 150 class who, you know, has done all of the work and 6 weeks in has some sort of family emergency or something and their grade just drops and they feel like they have to drop because they're not going to be able to keep up. That B block class then starting in a few weeks would give them an option to just continue on, you know, and catch the rest of the semester quickly. But that's what they like them for, is for people who have trouble at the beginning of the semester and still want to try to complete a class, because those people are usually real motivated by the time they've got into a bad spot. So everybody got it? Look good? Thank you, Justin. That looks really, really great. I'm going to take back over. Because I just am a real control freak like that. So I can get that one. That's all right. So the next one we had was our medieval. And they just were having us keep track of test scores. We called it a medieval because we were using that sentinel value to end the adding up of things. All medieval like that. Okay, so 7.5. 7.5 says arrays make programming easy and concise. And again, I don't want to go line for line with our pseudocode, but I do want to use it is like a starting point for our algorithm. So in this example, our algorithm is supposed to allow people to enter a name and enter a star to quit. We're going to count how many names there are, and after we've saved all of the names, we're going to print them out in reverse order. So whatever name was entered first will be printed last. That's what our while loop at the bottom is going to do. So a few things to notice about this one. First of all, this application is a lot like one we did a few weeks ago before we learned about arrays. It was like sibling names. And if you remember that one, we just said, enter a name of your sibling. And when they typed it in, we printed it out. And then they entered some like end or something to be done. So this example is really a lot like that. But notice how in this example, we're going to save those names they enter into an array instead of just spitting them out. So in our old one, it was input, output, input, output. Now we're actually going to input and save those things and then later on output all of them. Now, another thing that I want you to notice about this one is when they type the star to end, we are not going to put that star in our array. That one we just looked at that Justin helped us on, in that one, the star actually got put into the array, and we checked the array to see if that was there and said, oh, we must be done. Now that means we've got garbage in that array, right? Because that array is supposed to be full of names and numbers, not stars. So in this example, we're going to see a better way where we don't go ahead and put that data into our array until we're sure it's something we actually want to keep. So let's do this one. It should go pretty quick after that last one. What did they call it? Easy and concise. Also, we're putting it out backwards. I should say something much more effective, like in reverse order. All right, so we have an array. We're going to call it names. And I'm just going to say it's an array. It's an empty list. And we're going to use a count variable to keep track of things. So we'll start out with that equal to 0. We're going to print out this message, enter a name, and then we want to give some instructions, enter star to quit. Now notice I just printed out that message. I didn't use it to input anything. Now I'm going to actually read in what the user types, and I'm going to use a variable called temp name. So I'm just going to say, whatever you can input, save it in this variable temp name. I'm going to put a comment out here. This is called a priming read. We'll talk about that. We're going to use that variable temp name now and say we want to run this loop while temp name is not equal to that star. Now, why would I call that priming the pump? Well, in the olden days when they had the pumps outside to get their water, they couldn't just walk out there and start pushing the handle and get water out of it. They had to actually have some water and pour the water into the pump, and that would create, you know, that suction, that physics response that when they started pumping the handle, they could actually get water out. That's called priming the pump. Well, what does that mean? That means that you had to be a planner. You had to save enough water to prime the pump to get more water. If you used all your water, then you might not be able to get your pump working again. You would have to figure out some way to get around it. It also means that it takes one to get one, right? We had to have some water to get more water. And that's what we're doing here. So they use that terminology, priming the pump, a priming read, in saying that in order to get more temporary names, we're going to ask for the first temporary name. Then we'll use that one to start our loop. If they put a star in that very first time, we'll never even begin our loop, right? We'll be like, okay, you didn't want to enter any. But if they enter in a name, then we've primed the pump, we've got our loop started, so we can just get to work in there. Now inside our loop, because we've got that good name, we're ready to add it to our array. I'm going to use the Python append function to add that name into my array, into my list. Because we've been using the index values, but I want you to remember that because we're using a list, we also have list functions that are available to us to manipulate our list. So names.append, append means take something and add more to it. So I'm adding a name into my names list. Now, after I add that name, I'm going to update my count because I do need to keep track of how many names I enter. And then I'm going to ask them again to enter a name. So temp name equals input, enter a name, enter star to quit. Now, this isn't exactly the same as it was done outside of the loop. That's okay. As long as the last thing we do before our loop starts is prompt for input, and the last thing we do before our loop ends is prompt for input, we can keep that loop looping, knowing that everything's working. As soon as they type a star, our while loop will stop. So we don't have to have any weird junky if statements inside this while loop saying, if the name is a star, then break. If the name isn't a star, then continue. If it's number 47, then do this. We want to make all of that happen automatically in our logic. We don't want to use those break statements and things like that that alter control unless that's the best thing to use for our situation. Okay, so in this while loop now, we should be collecting everybody's name. Let's run it and make sure. I don't know, I'll add Tom. I'm obviously missing the end of my message here. So let me put in a star to end. I do have some debugging. I've got enter star to quit. I'm missing my period closing parenthesis there of that message. Now that should look more like that first one when I run. So good, that's our loop. Everything should be set, good to go. Now we want to print out this array in reverse order. So I'm going to set up a new variable, and they called it K. Justin's right, often we'll call them I. We'll use the name I for variables. I think that they probably didn't want to do that in our textbook just because it's so easy to mistype, but I'll use the letter I for our name because it is just so much more common. Now what I want to do is I want to set I equal to our count -1, because I want to set I to be the highest index that's valid in our list. Now I can do a new loop and say while I is greater than or equal to 0, I'm going to print out our names array at the position pointed to by the index value of I. And then I'm going to subtract from I. So this statement right here is what makes it hard to use that I as a variable. So that's I space hyphen equal 1. So be real careful with that one because we have a lot of characters that look very similar. That should end it. So we're prompting for names, adding them all to our array, then printing them out in reverse order. Let's try it. I mentioned that it was like the sibling thing, so I'll enter my family's names so that I can make sure it prints them out in reverse order. My last one was Ronnie, so I'll put in my star, and then I should get them printed out in the opposite order of how I entered them. Is it working? Got it, got it, got it. Everybody okay? It's not working? Let's see what's going on. Can you share? Oh, yay. Show us what you got. Well, chances are somebody else has the same thing. Oh, yep. The I needs to be in square brackets instead of parentheses. I was so worried about the, oh, there's an extra closing parenthesis there. There you go. I was worried about those other things, not focusing on our square bracket. Nice. Good job. Anybody else? Trauma. So that's some nice sample code for us to have. Now this next one is one that I do want to do together. We're going to use the length function to validate input. You guys used the len function earlier when we did an assignment and you were checking to see like how long the name was to decide how to print a plaque and things like that. But we can use that len function to find out how many entries we have in an array also. So that previous example where we set a counter, we kind of could have gotten away from that because we could have just used the length function to find out how big our array was instead of us having to manually count it. So let's try it with this one. See example 7.7 length. So I'm going to say we're going to use the length function to validate input. So in their example, they set up username as an array, and we could do that, but we'll just cause all sorts of confusion to Python. Because remember, Python treats any string as an array of characters already. So if we try to do this, it's going to just be terribly hard. We can just use a regular variable to hold that information and it will be fine. And then we do need another variable. They want to use an integer to determine whether the input was valid or not, because we'll use that integer to hold that length. So let's get this one going. I want to have my variable valid start out equal to 0. And I'm going to have a username variable that I will start out as an empty string. which is also an empty list of characters. Now I want to ask for a username. So I'll use my input statement, and this is going to be kind of long. Enter your username. It must be at least 1, but no more than 12 characters. So again, priming read, sort of, but we got to get that data before we can figure out if they did it properly or not. So we're going to use our valid variable, and we're going to set it equal to the length of the username that they typed in. That'll be the length of that username that was entered. So right now, if that valid variable ends up being 0, we know that it was wrong, right? They didn't type any characters. Or if that valid variable ends up being a value greater than 12, we know it's wrong. They didn't type in the right number. So now we can use a while loop to force them to enter their valid data. So our while condition is going to be if it's invalid because it's less than 0, or it's invalid because it's greater than 12, we know it's in error. So while either of those conditions are met, we're going to keep prompting them for that username. But we're going to change our prompt depending on what error they made. So if the problem is, oops, up here I should have while valid is less than 1, not less than 0, sorry. So if the problem is that our valid number of characters is less than 1, we're going to give them one message. I'm going to copy this whole thing. Whoops. Sometimes I don't do good on the colab copies. So if it's less than 1, I'm going to give them a different message. It's going to say username must contain at least 1 character. Please try again. Now, I can use the elif statement to see if valid is greater than 12, which it probably is, right? Because if it's not less than 1, it must be greater than 12 because it got into this while loop somehow. But I'll go ahead and do my condition there. If it is greater than 12, we're going to change our prompt a little bit. So let's copy this. And now we want it to say username cannot be more than 12 characters. Please try again. Now, either way, we want to check and update our valid variable because they should have typed in a new username. So outside of our if statement, we're going to check and update our valid value so that when we reevaluate our while loop, we'll be looking at that new username to see if it meets our length requirement. Now I'm going to go ahead and at the very end, outside of all of our loops, I'm going to print the username so that we just get some sort of feedback and we know that we got it. So let's try it. Enter your username. The first thing I'm going to try is just no input. So I'm going to press enter. And it says, oh, username must contain at least one character. Please try again. So I'll enter something that's really long. Too long. Nope. No, it says username cannot be more than 12 characters. Please try again. So it's looking like we've got it. So let's enter a valid one. And then it gets printed. Woohoo! So look at us validating our input length. It's kind of a complicated thing for us to do. So we can use this length function and put any array name here within the parentheses as our parameter, and then we'll be getting the length back for that list or that array name. That work for everybody okay? I'm going to use Word, and I'd like to update our Python quick reference document. It's been a little while since we've updated it, so I'm going to see if I can find it. I think that I have the theme song to Close Encounters of the Third Kind stuck in my head, and I think it's because of that monolith. Have you guys seen the monolith?
What you mean, like the actual like Utah one you're talking about?
Huh?
You're talking about like 2001 Space Odyssey monolith kind of thing.
The 2001 Space Odyssey monolith kind of thing that they found in Utah last week that's now in.
Oh yeah.
I don't know why it's giving me the Close Encounters theme song. But it's just a weird mix up in my brain, huh? But yeah, I really want to see the monolith. I wish I could have, you know, hiked through the Utah desert to see it. Where is it now? Romania or someplace? I think they're saying. All right, I can't.
They picked up the Utah monolith?
Huh?
They picked up the monolith and took it to Romania?
It disappeared and reappeared in Romania.
What the heck?
So they didn't take it, it disappeared. Very important point, apparently. Yeah, we'll have to look. You guys go look while I find this document because I've lost it. There it is. Yeah, much more important. Utah monolith. Oh, here's an eyewitness saying 4 men removed it. Oh, they see him. They caught him. But here's the new monolith in Romania. Oh, it's already vanished too, huh? The one in Romania, though, has a bunch more like sanding circles on it, you know, like somebody rebuffed it real fast and didn't get it done or something. It has all those.
Yeah, well, like, can you zoom in and look through the picture a little bit? Oh yeah, they did.
See, isn't that weird? Every picture I've seen of this one has circles on it like that, like somebody had a buffer and didn't do a good job on it or something.
Nine just have to look like they had like a really dense grain on it, or not dense, but I mean you know, heavy grain.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
So it's like oh, we'll buff it real quick and then smooth it out. They're like, we don't have no time, we gotta stick.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, what? I just started. It's like too late, Dave.
Yeah, I'm like, how embarrassing that that's your work.
Yeah.
You should have finished it. Yeah, so cool. We'll find out. But yeah, for some reason it gives me that Close Encounters of the Third Kind theme song. All right, so in our quick reference, it's been a while. We've been leaving it alone. The last thing that we did was functions. We'd added functions in here. So let's create a new table. I'm going to go down a little lower here. And if you remember to insert a table. We just want a 2-column table, and I'll just add a few rows here. Now we saw that we could say list variable equals open and close square brackets, and that creates a list named list variable. And it's empty, right? What else have we seen with arrays? I could do list variable equals 147, 250, 46. And that would be a list with initial entries, initial values. We've seen that we can access an array using an index. So I'm going to put something in here like square bracket, the word index, and then close square bracket. And this would be an integer being used as an index. And remember, that's simply a pointer into the list. Which item am I looking at? Now, if I want to save a value, save value equals list variable with an index value of 1, that would save the data at index location 1 into save value. Change that wording, you know, put more words, less words, whatever you need to help you remember that that's what's going on there. Now, one more thing that I want to put is if I have a list variable, I can use that index location, like list variable index location 1, to set that equal to something like a value. So in this case, I would be updating the data at index location 1 to the value. So these are kind of our array things that we've seen. So many things when we're working with just arrays. We saw len of list variable. Let me fix that because it's lowercase. Gives us the length or the number of entries in the array. Here is where we start saying, our quick reference is kind of getting a little large. We see where we could start writing a book, huh? But we're getting a lot more comfortable with going and finding this information from other sources too. Another thing that we can do is we can say list variable dot append with a value, and then we're adding that value to the list. So we could search and find other things that we can do with Python with arrays or with lists. So one thing that I want you to notice right away are these last two entries that we have. When we use the length function expects its parameter, remember a parameter being a thing that is passed within parentheses when we call a function, it expects its parameter to be an array so that it can tell you how long the array is. The append operation, notice how its syntax is different. When we're using append, append assumes that it depends on a certain specific array. Length is like, I'll work with any array. Just tell me the name of the array as a parameter. Append is not that way. Append is dependent upon the array that it's working on. So we have to have the array name that it's working on first, followed by a dot, then append. So the append function is dependent upon the array. The length function is not. You can see that difference in syntax. Now, the more you learn, the deeper your knowledge, the more that difference in syntax will make sense. But it can feel like it's inconsistent right now. I can tell you it's not. Length is a static function. It works on any instance. The append function only works for a specific array instance. So that's why its syntax is a little bit different. Now, if you want to do any color coding or anything, remember we were saying that programmer defined names were this blue. So as I look at what I've got here, my list variable is definitely a programmer defined name. So I'm going to make it blue. As we look at our array stuff, almost everything that we use is something that's a programmer defined name. I'm going to keep going here and try to get them all. One more blue. And then my value variable is my own variable. So I'm going to highlight it also. And then finally, in this example, the word index is a variable name that we could make whatever we wanted. So wow, look at that. Whenever we're working with arrays, we don't have near as many keywords and things like that as we have when we're calling functions and things. Okay, so let's save that and we'll close it. And we were looking at 7.7. I'm going to look at student activity 8. Student activity 8 is real similar to one that we did earlier when you guys have already gotten their first name and last name. So we're not going to include that one. Student activity 9. There we are. This is where we need to be. So I'm looking at, make sure I'm looking at the right one. Student activity 9, example 7.10. And I really do want to look at this one because the video I have left for you guys to watch is going to talk about working with files. And these test scores could almost be saved in a file. So today we want to look at them, asking a user to enter them all. But I want you to think about how tedious it is to enter all this data every time we need it, and how much easier it would be if we could just read it from a file. We're going to get close on time though. So before we start on this one, I want to look at the stuff that we have coming up in Canvas that you're going to have to take a look at on your own. So the big one is in week 14. I'm sure you guys can see that. Our assignment is to glitch an image. I'll show you some glitched image. They're so cool. I really love this. And this is a cool thing that a few years ago, a student did a presentation in class about image glitches. And he's kind of an arty guy. And he was like, this is a new art form. And I was like, oh my God, this is so cool. It really is cool. So an image glitch is kind of like DJing an album, right? Where you're glitching it up. It's the same idea, scratching up the image. So with our image here, all of these image glitches, you can see we've got some different things. Some of them are images overlaid on top of other images. This one's cool. This one's just got a little bit of a shift, right? So we can see that some of the pixels were stretched out this way or pulled back that way. Now, when we look at an image in this image class that we're going to be using, it considers an image like this to just be a two-dimensional array of rows and columns. So every pixel on here is an entry in this two-dimensional array that makes this image. So we can affect every single individual pixel. So what we can do in some cases, like here with this sort of smear thing, they took this pixel and instead of leaving it where it is, they moved it over a bit, you know, and so we altered the location of that pixel. A lot harder than it looks in the code, because in the code, what are we going to put what was there? Are we going to save some things? How are we going to do it? But anyways, it can get pretty intense. This one I really like. I don't know. This one is like some weird face, you know, that's got the weird alien eyes and stuff. But the part that's overlaid here, I used to spend a lot of time repairing and working with Linux and Unix systems. So I spent a lot of time watching hard drive checks run, and that's what this is a hard drive sector check when a hard drive is failing, and it's showing you the bad sectors. And so if you've spent weekends watching that like I have, you like seeing it glitched up on an image because it looks pretty cool. And so they took this screenshot of the hard drive sector analysis program and glitched it onto that face and did a, you know, they got a few like white spots in here, some colorization spots, just adding some things. White spots, random spots like that are real easy for us, right? Because we could just generate a random number and say at that location, we're going to put, you know, a certain color. And so we can handle that pretty easy. So I am sad that you guys are going to watch this video and do this on your own, because it's a really fun one. And I really like watching and seeing what everybody does with it. And it's one where you're going to have questions as you're watching that video, because you're going to want to know, well, how does that work and how does this work? So think of those things, make a list if you need to. So I want you to try to watch this video and work on your image glitch before next Tuesday, because next Tuesday is our last meeting. And if you have any questions or problems or anything, I want you to bring them with you on Tuesday. But don't feel like you have to wait. Let me know if you're running into problems between now and then. Get on Discord. If I don't answer, maybe somebody else will, because there are some things to this one. We have to go to GitHub to get some code to make it work. We have to get some images, you know, off the internet, and they have to be the certain format to make them all work and everything. So you can definitely run into some issues on this one. And I want you to have fun with it. So if you start getting frustrated, you know, stop, step back, let somebody help, because it's definitely not one that I want you to consider as a frustrating thing. I want it to be really fun and a great way to really experiment with loops and two-dimensional arrays and all those kinds of things. Some of these are pretty cool. I don't know. I like the matrixy ones. I don't like the weird, you know, Picasso type things. So it's not my thing. This glitch where we've just slid things sideways again, that's a good one. In the video, one of the first things that we'll do is just make an image grayscale. So we'll go through all of the pixels and adjust the pixels to take out all the color. So it's really cool just to even see how you can do that. So this video is a full 2-hour block recorded. So give yourself time. She's like, oh crap. Yep, if you can't sleep, start it up, whatever you want to do, and you can get it all going. So the image glitch stuff is towards the end, but all of the stuff that leads to it is important because it's all checking out reading and writing files. Again, as you get into it, there are going to be things that you're missing. So post in Discord, because if you can't find it, somebody else isn't going to be able to find it either. And this is not the way that I would really like to do this assignment. So if you see something missing, let's get on it so that we can get it fixed right away. Okay, having said that, let's get back to our colab document. So we have time. So,
One question. You keep
sure.
referring to the video.
Uh-huh.
I don't see it.
You don't see it?
Am I missing it? Is it under week 14 assignment glitch and image?
No, it's right up here, week 14 lecture file handling and image glitch.
Okay, all right. I see.
You see it?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and it's long. Okay. That'll get everybody going there. Okay, so here we have what should be a file. So this is a two-dimensional array. And we can use two-dimensional arrays, but they're confusing. And we don't need to, because we have other ways of handling things. Anything that we do with a two-dimensional array, we could probably figure out another way to do it. But you need to know that you can do multi-dimensional arrays and how to handle them and those kinds of things. So we do want to take a quick look at it. What we have here are students, and each student has taken 5 tests. And we would like to keep track of those test scores. So for student number 1, we want to have test 1, test 2, test 3, and test 4, and test 5. Student number 2, test 1 through 5. So we could have a separate array for each student. That wouldn't work very good. That would be pretty hard to program. So it would be nice if we could use a two-dimensional array and just have rows and columns so that we had our specific test results, our scores for each student. So when we're working with a two-dimensional array like this, it should look a lot like an Excel spreadsheet. Next, we have rows and we have columns. Now we've seen that our index is used to identify a specific location. Now we have to have 2 parts to our index, the row and the column. So right here would be 0, 0, right? Row 0, column 0. Row 0, column 1. Row 0, column 2. Python, along with most modern programming languages, is row dominant. That means that our row index is going to come first. So this entry for Boynton would be row 1, column 0. Row 1, column 1. Down here, row 2, column 0. Row 2, column 1. So we would access that index within square brackets with the comma. And the comma is what tells the programming language, oh, this is a multi-dimensional array. So it knows how to handle that. So our indexes have to be a little bit more complicated. And when we create it, we have to create it a little bit more complicated. Seven, 2. There it is. Okay, so this one is kind of a long involved thing. I don't know if our notebook is a little glitched up here, but here's the actual pseudocode for this one. So we want to create this array, and in their example, they've said they are going to hold up to 30 students, and they're going to hold 5 test scores for each student. We've declared our student as an integer, and which test they're working on is an integer. We're going to go through a for loop and add 30 students for each, and then 5 test scores for each student. So we're going to have to modify the way this pseudocode is set up, because otherwise we'll be testing forever. And again, that goes back to why this should be a file. We should read this data in as a text file. Now, when we work with a 2-dimensional array in Python, we can do that by using 2 sets of square brackets. Let's search Python 2-dimensional array. Now I've got this tutorials point article. I looked at it yesterday. I don't really care for it very much. Let's look at Stack Overflow. So they say they thought that they should do square bracket set, but it doesn't work. So what do they need? They said, well, you're really adding an index to an index. So it's kind of a weird setup. Now, in the example up on the board, I said there was a comma between those 2 index entries. But as we look at the Stack Overflow entry, I realized, wait, I was thinking about some other languages, wasn't I? Because this example shows our row is in its own square bracket, and then our column index is in its own square bracket. So it is just a little different than working with a 1-dimensional array. I'm looking at our time. I don't think we're going to have time, but we'll forge ahead. Let's at least get our index or our array allocated. Oh, yes, let's see it. You are so awesome. Okay.
So as you said, with the
Beautiful.
pseudocode, I did 2 students, 2 test scores.
Okay, good.
Just for testing.
Uh-huh.
And this is, there we go. You know, and like you said, when you're declaring your 2-dimensional array, the bracket inside, see, this is your array, outside, and then these are your.
How many dimensions?
So you got rows and columns.
And instead of using append, we're using insert.
Yes, okay, so, yes.
Go ahead.
Append will, there's a lot of different ways you could add to lists.
Uh-huh.
Python, append will put it to the end of the list. Insert allows you to select the actual index. So, say for example, the one that we skipped over real quick.
Mm-hmm.
This is basically just practice of indexing.
Beautiful.
Selecting where you're actually putting stuff. So I'd recommend definitely mastering.
Practicing that one, great. So if you try to use the append, you get an error, right?
Yes, because you'd have to set it up where you declare this as, say, an integer, and then set up and actually set up your arrays to list them out like what I think they did in the pseudocode.
Yes.
So there's different rules for different ways you go about that. And in the beginning, I started declaring, the length of your arrays.
Uh-huh.
And then Then after that, I abandoned that.
Good, because yeah, with Python, that's really kludgy.
It's just nicer to set up with a blank array, know how to work with that because
Hmm.
it's flexible.
Beautiful.
So line 6, what we're doing here, this is your row. I is your row. When you're, the syntax for insert, so you can have your array with your row, dot insert, and then what we're appending or inserting is going to be your column, and then whatever you want to insert. That's how the syntax for that one works there, your dot insert. That was a little confusing just because you have your row declared here, and then inside your insert method, you have to declare the column. So it's not your.
I see.
Are not
I
right
see.
next to each other.
Oh, and so that's down in your for loop. You have the dynamic test number.
What was that?
Oh, on line 10,
Mm-hmm.
you have test score where you're inserting the scores.
Yes. So test is just a counter, and so instead of the test is going to be going through my columns. It's just adding to the counter to go through the column. So
Perfect.
it'd be column 1, 2, and then
Just awesome.
just another variable.
Thank you. That looks so good. So much practicing that we can do. Oh, Nikki's got a question. It's a really good question too. She wants to know, Justin, about your print statement on line 5. What's the F? I saw you doing that in another one and thought that was a great way to print things.
Am I using F strings here? Okay, line
Yeah.
5. So if you look up, there's quite a different few ways to do print statements or just concatenation. This is like, say if you're like, you should definitely understand concatenation, but say if you're struggling with it or want the easiest way, F strings, you just add an F, and then everything in quotes, and your variable is in these braces. No pluses, no added, and declaring it as a string. F string is like the end all easiest way to print variables. It doesn't matter if it's a string, integer.
I have never seen it done before that way. I love it. That's exactly the same syntax as we use in C#.
Oh, it is?
Yes. And so my poor brain was just like, what is that? I could remember how to do formatting in Python if I can remember.
Yeah, I've been using it, but I've actually been still sticking with the way you concatenate normally.
Right.
Just in case, because I was like, well, maybe C# is going to be like that.
No, and it is. That's the older way of doing it in C#. And this is the newest capability in C# with a formatted string like that. So it's really, really similar. So that's kind of nice. You had a question?
She was asking another question.
Oh, okay, thanks. Does that work with the %? It's an alternative. So with the % sign, that % is our placeholder. With this F string, like Justin's talking about, these curly braces with the variable name as our placeholder, and it's going to be replaced by that variable's value. So it's a lot, what's the word? To me, it makes a lot more sense. It's just a lot more understandable.
Yeah.
That it's a lot easier to use because you can get away from all of that extra formatting stuff and placeholders and just use the variable you actually want to take place of this placeholder. So
the only usefulness I ever found for the placeholders was when we were learning in the Code Academy, date and time. You know, when you give it a date with, you could make it shorter, or the time, get rid of the army time, because you're selecting.
Well, and if this is like C#, which I'm assuming it probably is, we can probably put some additional information after that variable name to specify those kinds of formatting things. So in C#, you can put a colon after the variable name and then use your formatting specifiers.
Oh, yes, that's how I do the round.
Is it?
If outside those further back, 'cause if I put round here,
Hallelujah, something the same in
And-
C# as Python.
and then right here, do like 2, and say that that was a number.
Uh-huh.
In our supermarket program, I did that to round.
Awesome.
dollar amounts.
Okay, I think that formatted string is a great thing. Yeah, it's really neat. I don't know where you found that. And
Really?
Python keeps evolving too. That's what's cool, is because Python is open source, you know, it's an open source programming language, people can develop new functions like that and get them added to Python. And it's a constantly evolving language. So hopefully we'll see more things like that that kind of simplify some of the weird areas. Awesome. Okay, we're ready. Yeah, it's really neat. Thank you, sir, very much. Now, as far as the rest of those collab documents go, let's take a quick look before we go. Share mine. What I'll be looking at for grading are the ones that we've done in class and these ones that we've talked about in class. And then I think that's this one. 712 expands upon 7.11 to allow the user to ask for a specific student and print out their scores. Now that's going to be kind of a tough one. So that's the only thing that I'd like you to try to do on your own. And it's the last thing in our collab notebook. So that should put you in really good shape for that. Now I set it to be due Thursday night. So that's a couple of days for working on that. And that was because I didn't want it to be dragging into anything else. I'm working on our final. I'll get it posted as soon as possible. As I say here, it's under construction. It'll be a hands-on project, and the project will be due during the week of finals. So I'll try to make it available to you as soon as possible, but you should have plenty of time since we will have it due that week. Next time is our last time. So do let me know if you run into any questions. Anything else? We're over. You guys have a great day. And I'll see you Tuesday next week.
I know you said you're using Colab as an